Welcome to Choose the Bear, a podcast for people living single and or child-free, or who are just curious about a life built on independence, intention, and joy. Because being single and child-free isn't a phase, it's a path. I'm your host, Kat Calvin. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Today's guest is my dear friend, Kenyora Johnson. We both met because we both, in different years, were Roddenberry Fellows, and I just immediately loved her, and for several years now, she has been one of my favorite people. She is incredibly brave and has dealt with everything life throws at a person with grace and courage. She is the CEO of End Rape on Campus and is really working to lead the charge to end sexual violence on college campuses and is doing a really extraordinary job at that. And it was really great to finally have this conversation with her, which I think you may learn some things that you didn't know, and will also see yourself and women that you love and admire in Kenyora. So I hope you enjoy it. Well, hello, everyone. I'm so excited because today we're on with one of my favorite people who I love and admire and who does some really, really extraordinary work that is challenging at the best of times. And we are not at the best of times right now. Whatever point in the future that you are listening to this, it's not the best of times. You could be 30, 45, and I'm going to guess that we have not solved world peace. But particularly right now, read your history books, time traveler. Stuff is tough. And I find that my dear friend Kenyora Johnson has always approached things with a calmness and a grace that at least externally, her face just now, maybe not inside, but to the outside world, that speaks to her either being heavily drugged or very, very zen. So hello, Kenyora. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Kat. Thank you for having me.
So start by telling everyone just who you are and what you do.
Hi, everyone. Yes, Kenyora Johnson. I am what I like to call a social engineer and not the typical sense, meaning I've basically taken my social work degree and merged it in with my love for engineering, particularly architectural engineering, which was what I had intended to become in my former years. But I like to think that serendipity led me to End Rape on Campus, which is where I'm at now as the Chief Executive Officer. I hail from Lynn, Massachusetts, completely a New Englander, but I currently now am in the Raleigh area of North Carolina, and really enjoying the peace and quiet and the serenity that the city life does not offer.
That's true. Having moved from LA to a small rural town in Arizona, it's very quiet and peaceful, and you just sort of feel like you're closer to nature. And even though there are 10 million things I miss about big city life, it is nice to have a little sabbatical.
Absolutely, absolutely. What else?
So what I want to talk about in Rape on Campus, can you just give us first just like the primer? What is it? What does it do?
Yeah, so End Rape on Campus works to end campus sexual violence by providing support for survivors in their communities, prevention through education, and policy reform from the local to the federal levels, all while centering on historically marginalized student communities. And so our organization has been around since 2013, founded by students who are survivors of campus sexual violence, who basically saw a gap in understanding of Title IX as a vehicle that students can use towards justice after campus sexual assault. And our organization essentially helped lead the way, if you will, in terms of increasing awareness around Title IX as that tool towards justice, especially during the Obama administration, um, and really has been instrumental in helping to lead a number of state legislations, including Enough is Enough, Yes Means Yes in California, and a couple of other states like that is New York, and here in North Carolina as well. And so since I've taken the reign as the chief executive officer and been with an organization since 2018, I have been able to really shift our paradigm in a way. So I mentioned we center historically marginalized student survivors, but that was not always a part of our mission. If anything, we had initiatives that centered that. But I really found that we needed it to be not only a part of our mission, but a part of our framework. And so, centering the margins, which was actually originally created by a former staff member to focus on Black women and HBCUs, um, that was an initiative that focused on that. And I felt like there's something that we need to be doing here that's a little bit more expansive. And not to say that we shouldn't focus on Black women as survivors at HBCUs, but that we should be centering all historically marginalized student survivors because of the multitude of intersectional systems that not only students experience, but mainly for the fact that sexual assault knows no bounds and anyone can be a victim by it. And so I essentially took Centering the Margins initiative and made that into more of our framework. And now, through that lens, we've been able to create what is called a campus accountability map and tool. And that is designed to empower prospective and current college students and their families with the ability to compare up to 3 colleges and universities sexual assault statistics, prevention efforts, investigation policies, and survivor support resources. And there's up to right now 1,700 colleges and universities, including Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands, on this mapping tool. So right now we're in the midst of trying to expand upon our mapping tool to increase the number of schools, especially now with Title IX being reverted back to the 2020 regulations under this current administration, whose name I really just don't want to mention at all.
But you don't like President Musk?
Oh my gosh.
I'm so many things that I want to go to from there. But one of the things that, and honestly, I've always been curious about, and just haven't asked you, I what are the approaches that universities are taking? So when you're looking at like what those preventative measures are, et cetera, what is happening on campuses? What works, and what should universities be doing?
That's a kind of convoluted question because that's actually one question that I typically get is like, what school is doing the best? And what I tend to say is it's actually individual people at schools that are who are carrying out the best ways, I think, to handle this issue. And I would say it's accompanied by students and and those who are part of particular student organizations, where there is collaboration between the students and that trusted individual at the school. And what I have seen in terms of handling campus sexual assault, especially in that type of environment where trust is there, usually that person, and it's typically not the Title IX coordinator whose job it is to implement said processes and procedures, but it's usually someone of another higher authority that essentially helps to move the needle by showing students where to go, who to speak to, and helping to make sure that the Title IX coordinator or another designated authority is doing what they're supposed to do under Title IX. And if anything outside of the Title IX space, helping that student or students receive accommodations or resources that are necessary to help them navigate through the trauma, navigate through their survivorship, and as well as navigate through their academic journey. Um, I've seen a number of departments, and especially within student life, come together with students and student organizations to conduct like a series of sorts throughout the year that talk about not like campus sexual assault as the main theme, but maybe some subtopics like healthy relationships, bystander intervention, consent and awareness programs, things of that nature that are typically, and I think should be held by the administrators. Like it should be a part of not just an orientation, but a part of what schools should be doing on a constant basis. But it's typically something that it may be under a department, but it's typically moved by and executed by students. uh, so I would say it's a number of different factors that help to play a role in the preventative measures piece. But it unfortunately it, there's not enough happening outside of the basics, and the basics is to make sure that people are aware of who to go to, putting up information across the campuses, hosting said workshops and trainings to make sure folks understand what Title IX is, what sexual assault looks like, sex-based discrimination is, sex-based violence is, gender-based violence, however we want to name it, that it's education that is being put out there, awareness is being put out there, and that it's not just a one-time thing, but throughout the year. So that's where I've seen things help, particularly for students to know, like, oh, I know where to go to. And I think schools do a good job at that, at the educational awareness piece. It's then the actual implementation once something happens that is a little lackluster. That's when we see victim blaming and shaming and maybe delays of investigations, or students are graduating out, or maybe someone is transferring, whether it's the perpetrator or the survivor, or maybe it's an employee that's being passed around, or what some folks would say, passing of the trash when they go to another campus in order to avoid accountability. And um, so I'd say what I've seen is the education awareness pieces are definitely there. They could be definitely tightened up, but it's the implementation, the actual execution of the policies and procedures that are much, much, much more needed in terms of a whole evaluation, I would say.
So, could we, before we sort of go more into that, can you give a quick definition of what Title IX is and how it applies to this particular situation?
Well, what's interesting is now that we're under the 2020 regulations,
Oh,
we're
yeah, so I was gonna say, talk about Title IX before, and then
before all of
talk
the
about what's happening with it now. Yes.
yeah, so Title IX is a civil rights law where basically Title IX is meant to protect folks from um, discrimination on the basis of sex when they're at an institution that's receiving federal funding. Um, so that's supposed to be the baseline. So its original intention when it was first born in 1972 was to ensure that women could get into school and can participate in different types of fields that were mainly male dominated back in the day, that they had access to sports,
Yes.
and things of that nature. But it wasn't until the 1990s when it became seen as a tool that could be used to talk about sex-based discrimination, particularly campus sexual assault. And that was under the Clinton administration, from my understanding.
Yeah.
However, yeah, it wasn't until Obama, which, yeah, the irony in that. It wasn't until Obama administration is where we saw a true uptick of the federal government really coming down on schools and holding them accountable, and implementing more enforcement
Yeah.
on schools, really doing their part in terms of prevention and intervention methods with respect to campus sexual assault, because it was uh, the heightened awareness around campus sexual assault was just like extraordinary in the like 2010s to 2013s time.
So that was Title IX before.
Mhm.
What happened in 2020 and what is happening now, both with Title IX and with a lot of these other changes that are being made that will impact both EROC's work and also how universities are able to handle these situations?
Mhm. Well, in 2020, during, the infamous COVID year, the first Trump administration essentially rolled back the former Title IX regulations from Obama administration, um, and essentially stripped away student survivors' rights, um, lessens the liabilities on schools, and really uh, put perpetrators in a way up on a pedestal, and you know essentially removed accountability from those who were accused of perpetuating harm against another. And it was during the COVID 2020 which a lot of us not only felt that this was a time where the Trump administration under the former Secretary of Betsy DeVos, um, really using COVID as a means to really push their agenda forward, when it came to the Department of Education and Title IX especially. Um, what we had seen is not only an increase in domestic violence cases once schools closed down during COVID, but once schools started to reopen up in the following year, that's when we saw what we called the double red zone. And so the red zone, for those who are not familiar with that phrase, it's a period of time between August and November when students return back to campus, and there is at least 50% chance that campus sexual assault will take place, because you're having, first years coming into campus for the first time, maybe folks who are transferring from a different school coming to a new campus, and then in this time period when folks are coming back after COVID, you now have sophomores who are coming to campus for the first time because they didn't get to come to campus their freshman year. And then, of course, everyone trying to, engage in college life and party life and be exposed to Greek life and all of that jazz that essentially helps to foster campus sexual violence, unfortunately. And so when we fast forward to the Biden administration, Biden came in, um, essentially executive order on the 2020 regulations. And it wasn't until 2024 that we got a new regulation that was expansive of its original definition. So as I mentioned earlier, Title IX focused on the basis of sex, but Biden expanded it to be inclusive of gender identity, sexual orientation, and sex stereotypes, in order to also protect students who are a part of the LGBTQIA communities, um, especially because we had this, heightened, um, uh, I don't even know how to frame it, but this propaganda against transgender and intersex and gender nonconforming students who were also sports athletes that were being denied under the Trump administration in the first term. Um, and then you see conservatives during the Biden administration really trying to continue to perpetuate these negative messages against these communities. And then now that the Trump administration is here with Trump's executive order, which I also want to say, when Biden did his executive order, he followed processes and procedure. He filed an executive order, and then the departments had to do their due diligence and go through what's called a notice and comment period, which is what all of us regular citizens get to engage in and say, here's what we like and don't like about this regulation, with some like evidence to suggest why this doesn't work or that should work, or this does work. In this day and age, under the second Trump administration, upon following his executive order, they didn't do a notice and comment period. They just said, we're revoking the 2024 regulations that Biden did, and we're reverting back to 2020. And we're about to dismantle the Department of Education and put it back in the hands of states, and make sure that parents have more rights than they ever had before, especially in terms of what is it, FERPA, and the Parent Privacy Protection Acts and things of that. So we're now starting to see the conservatives really coming into play with these dangerous agendas to make it seem like transgender folks and intersex students and gender nonconforming folks are like these evil people who are trying to destroy education, and that parents you know don't know anything that's happening with their student because schools are trying to protect the privacy of the student, which is correct, because we also know that there are a lot of students out here who may be dealing with domestic violence and by their own parents at times, or if they are transitioning, from as a identified transgender female or male, there's a lot of folks who are growing up in families who don't agree with what's going on with their children. Um, so there's this propaganda that's happening, and what people fail to realize is this is a very small, 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 minute community of people that are pushing this agenda forward, and it's created this huge, momentous campaign, essentially. So as it pertains to Iraq and our other advocates out in this field, I could speak for Iraq side and from what I've been able to see, and I'll just say there's a lot of disillusionment from students from their communities, especially with this government overall, because there's so much happening in terms of the DEI, and now what the Smithsonian is being attacked, and it's all of these things that shouldn't matter right now are being attacked when we should be focusing on campus sexual assault. We should be solving poverty in the United States. Um, but it's hurting us as organizations that also look to funding from foundations and corporations that were once progressive or seemingly progressive and are now turning the tides and becoming conservative in their own thoughts and in the way in which they proceed moving forward. And so we are seeing monies being essentially stripped away from us and the work that we're trying to continue, as well as this administration really being able to do whatever it wants without policy and procedure, and act like they're the law and they don't have to adhere to what has been instituted in terms of structure, governmental structure. So it's doing a number of things on us as an organization, from a financial aspect, from us trying to push to ensure that the civil rights laws that we do have for student survivors remain intact, And it's not to say that these laws are perfect. They definitely need a lot of assessment and reevaluation and revision, but they're there as part of guidance and as a means for folks to be able to say, okay, here's what I know I can do in order to either intervene in this way or prevent some sort of prevention method in this way. But the other part too is how we've been able to spread education and awareness on this issue is not the same as it used to be even just last year because of who we know is controlling social media and how we get information out there through the traditional media resources too. And so we're seeing a lot of people either flip-flopping or, going from one side of the party line to the other, because people are also scared out here. Like people are being either deported or their rights are being stripped away in a matter of days just because they disagree with the administration. Um, and we're seeing people being kidnapped and people who are lawfully here, supposed to be here, as well as folks who are quote unquote, no, actually, I'm not even going to say that. I'll say folks who are undocumented and have had pathways towards citizenship are also being stripped away of their rights as well. Um, and so there's just a lot of things that are happening all at once. And the rapid response ways and tactics in which we were able to handle, I know I'm not able to because I am one of one at NRAPE on campus right now. I'm in the process of rebuilding at the same time, as well as trying to, ensure that this technology that I've been able to institute remains, especially if we don't know where the Department of Education is going. And I know that was a long-winded way of answering.
No, it was, but it was good. It was good info, and I think that there's so many things that are happening there. One thing that folks who aren't sort of paying attention to academia may not know is that universities themselves are basically on fire right now. They're freezing hiring, they're freezing funding, they're freezing admissions, they're rescinding grad school admissions. I'm you see in the news sort of the bigger stories about like, Colombia having 400 million frozen, but that's happening all over. And schools are either dealing with that or they are preparing to deal with that by making significant cuts. And we're seeing it across the board, Ivy League state schools, like everywhere. And so programs like these end up being, they're already always underfunded and usually only have one person doing them anyways. So they're the first things that get cut. But of course, that doesn't mean the behavior stops. So what is your advice for women who are on campuses right now? I went to a women's college. I don't know why every woman doesn't go to a women's college. Like there are no men. It's great. There are like professors, but like every woman should go to a women's college, and it doesn't reduce your chances of gender-based violence on campus to zero, but it sure does reduce it by like 95%. Maybe not Spelman because they're in a big city and there's a men's college down the road, but I went to a women's college in the middle of the country. There was nothing but us and snow and horses, literally. So my number one advice for women is go to a women's college. But other than that, given the times that we're in, given the fact that already universities didn't have sufficient resources or methods for dealing with all of the many types of gender-based violence, discrimination, or assault, et cetera, that women face on campus, but that it's going to now, potentially get worse, or at least there will be fewer protections. What is your advice for young women who are on campus right now?
Funny, as someone who went to a women's college myself as well.
Yes, you did.
In Boston, right in the heart of the Fenway area. Yes, Kat, you are correct. Going to women's college does not exempt you from campus-based violence or sexual violence, but yes, you happen to.
But
It reduces it by a lot.
yeah.
However, given where I was at, I was surrounded by other co-ed schools.
I saying if you go to a women's college in the middle of the city, like if you go to Barnard, you're in the middle of New York, you're attached to Columbia, there's still men.
Columbia, exactly.
You're like I just, and you go way out to South Hadley, Massachusetts, where there is nothing else but you and the horses and one pizza place and the worst Chinese food restaurant in history and zero bars. You're going to you're going to be a lot safer. It's going to be 95% because it was just
A piece of advice I would say to women is find someone, and I won't even say someone, I would say find several people on campus that are employees, staff members, administrators that you know you can trust. And I don't mean to say like when you find that person and be like, okay, what do you think about campus sexual assault? Like, I don't need to start off conversations that way when you're, um, building a rapport with someone, but identify like the way that I'm thinking about it is I remember in elementary school or middle school and high school, there was always a teacher or a guidance counselor that I always like, if there's anything that I know I need, I can go to this person.
no.
You know, I can trust this person because this person has showed up for me in this way or that way. I would say approach, college life in the same manner, finding your person or your set of people who are on that campus, even if it's like the person who makes your food every day. Like, I'll tell you right now, there's a woman named Stella who, because I said her name, anyone who went to Simmons, especially back in my year, would know exactly who I'm talking about. She was someone who worked in our residential in dining halls and was just always amazing to everyone, called everyone baby. And she still works at Simmons, from my understanding, too, to this day. And I've graduated now over 15 years ago. Oh my gosh. And she's just like the person that you feel like you can go to and talk to, even if it was like you just needed a little pick me up. Um, but there's always someone on campus that you know you can trust. And so find that person. But I would also say, like, if anything were to happen to you, know that it is not your fault either. It is not your fault. And what happened to you is not your fault. And that you are not what happened to you.
I am writing that down because that is such an important message. I'm What advice do you have for parents
Mm.
who are now sending their daughters to campuses that are already in turmoil and where they may not have as many resources and maybe, very far away. I went all the way across the country at 17 to college. And so it's difficult for parents, but I know that there's probably a lot of fear. What advice do you have for them on how to support their daughters as they go off to college?
Ask all the questions. And I would even say, use our campus accountability mapping tool. Like, it's there not only as a resource, but if there's other questions that you have, reach out to us, reach out to me. We will find you, any of the resources you need. But when you're going to do the campus tours, so you want to ask the questions like, oh, what's your Title IX office? And like, do you guys host these type of events? And how do you approach this? How do you approach that? Like, ask the questions, and not just about the programs that your child is excited about or what the dorms look like. Those things are important, sure, but you want to know, how does a school take not just say they take these things seriously, but what do they actually do? How do they um, provide prevention education? What does it look like when they intervene? So it's like asking all the questions, especially before something happens. And then if something were to occur, who should their daughter go to? those types of questions, because essentially parents are entrusting these institutions to take care of their child. Um, especially if they're the ones paying for it, they're definitely entrusting an institution to make sure that they're watching over their child. But whether they're paying for it or not, um, they're sending off their child to the next chapter of their lives towards adulthood. And there's going to be a lot of decision making that not only will their child have to experience, but also I would even say trust. Um, because while parents are sending their daughters, you have other parents sending their sons too. And so my thing is, it's, are we educating our sons to understand, what perpetuation of harm looks like, and how to keep certain things in their pants. uh
Certain
you know
things.
Trying to keep it PG for the podcast. uh, but how do we educate our sons to do, I don't want to say do better, but just to know about self autonomy for their own selves too. What my favorite professors, who both were at Columbia, Jennifer, um, Seamus Khan, and Jennifer. Why am I forgetting her name right now? And I shouldn't. Her last name. They wrote Sexual Citizenship. Jennifer Hirsch. Thank you. And their whole thing was around sexual citizenship and people understanding that they have autonomy, and recognizing that other people also have autonomy and have the right to say no or yes to the things they want to do when it comes to their body. And so, if parents may be more protective of their daughter sometimes than they are of their sons. But I think nowadays what we're starting to see is parents becoming even more protective of their sons who they want to be falsely accused, which honestly is less than 2% of cases that come through. I know
Parents,
people
what are you doing?
like false accusations are so low, it's not even funny. Um but yes, again, parents, ask all the questions. All the questions.
That's wildly upsetting. And I'm all right. I want to switch this over to something that's less deeply, darkly depressing. Um, which is talking about sort of friendship and community and how important it is in your life. You are running this org and you've had a lot of like ups and downs and challenges, as we all do running nonprofits. You've recently made a big move and big life changes, but you have really good community and really good friendships. And I just want you to talk a little bit about that's one of the things that we emphasize on the podcast a lot is how important, especially for single women, it is that we have really good friendships and communities. So just talk a little bit about how they've been important to you in your life.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. My friends, I would say, are probably, I think I have the best friends in the world. And my best friend would actually say, I don't know who else you're talking about, because it really is just about me. Um, and she's absolutely amazing. She's been my best friend since we've been, um, uh, actually before we even started at Simmons. We found each other through a Simmons Facebook group, the summer before we started, and since then we've been glued to the hip. I now am 15 minutes down the street from her. But she's absolutely like my ride or die, will do anything for me, like no questions asked. But she also is someone who will also hold me accountable, and um isn't afraid to tell me what I need to hear and not what I want to hear. Um and I would say she's more than my best friend. She's my sister. And a lot of people, when we were growing up in college, thought that we were sisters, that people would call each other by our names. And sometimes we'd have the same hairdo, and not because that's what we wanted to do. It just happened to be like that at times. But we grew up differently, but we have such like this spiritual connection. I don't even know if it's like a soul ties, or like she's my soulmate or something, but like we could talk for days, and then we don't talk, and then we'll pick up right where we left off, when we do call each other. But now that we're in the same city, it's like, what are you doing today? So, uh, and her daughters I adore. They're like my favorite little peoples. But even my closest and my other best friends that I've known since childhood, are also just amazing people who I've been able to count on and um, really talk about the things that I'm dealing with in my life and have seen me in a lot of transitions. Even when I was married and now I'm newly divorced, and have seen a lot of that um, transition within me, especially of how I've been showing up
Uh-huh.
this world. People may probably think now, like, oh my gosh, you've been more quiet than usual. And it's like, that's because right now I'm in this period of solitude and this period of stillness, because there's a lot that I have experienced. And quite honestly, I'm getting a little bit tired. I'm exhausted. My body is exhausted. And so I'm trying to lean in more on rest. And the best part about the friends that I have is they understand that, and they're giving me that time. They're giving me the support, and they're still being there for me, even if it's like, hey, I don't feel like talking today, or um, you know, it's going to be a while before I'm back on social media or something. Well, whatever that is, or whatever that looks like for me, they have been very much supportive of me. And if anything, they're like, well, why don't we do this and go out and do this and go on this trip and that trip? I'm like, first of all, can we get our coins together? Did you hear me not talk about this financial crisis like we're all dealing with right now with funding? But like, I would love to travel and do a lot of that. It's just I feel like our world is on fire too. And so, um, you know, being in community has been very helpful, especially during this chaotic time period. Um, and I'm just so forever grateful, especially to you too, Kat. You're someone who I've been able to lean into and talk about the deepest, darkest things that are happening in my life. And you've been there to say, well, I'm gonna challenge you on that. And that is the best part I love about my friends is folks like you who are not afraid to respectfully challenge and say, I got a different idea, or have you considered this? Have you thought about this? Because those are the people who also help you to grow internally, and help you to see beyond yourself at times. And so I'm very appreciative to you and to my friends and to everyone who's in my corner, because the same folks who show up for me, I'm showing up for them like 10 times harder. It's like, I may not be able to do this, but I could do this. Like, it's my way of saying, like, I love you and I care about you. And, I want to be of support to you if there's anything that you need, because not just because you've been there for me, but because I know myself, I like to be liked. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I like to be liked. I do not like when people don't like me. It also depends on who the person is.
Right.
Because if you don't like me and I don't care, that's just the Taurus in me. But but no, community and friendship is definitely important to me, especially in, someone in my 30s and trying to navigate life.
Yeah.
Period. Mhm.
Yeah. Well, this has been marvelous. I was partially depressing, but not because of you, because of the state of the world. But people always ask me why I feel so hopeful and optimistic right now. And it's because I know people like you. My whole life, my world is surrounded by incredible people doing amazing work. And I have so much faith in those people that I know we're going to get through this and rebuild to something better. And I believe that very much with you. So thank you for being you. And can you tell people how they can support eRock and keep up with what you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to our website at endrapeoncampus.org and click on our donate button. Right there, you can become a monthly donor if you'd like and support us in our evolution to become even bigger and larger. as well as to expand our campus accountability map and tool. And you can also follow us on social media. All of our handles are at NRAPE on campus. And if you'd like to follow me, I'm at Her Story K.
And that will, of course, all be linked in the show notes. I am a monthly donor, and it's the thing that I love seeing come out every month. So join me on that and support Kenyora's work. And thank you so much for doing this and for being you.
Thank you, Kat. I adore you.
Thanks for listening to Choose the Bear. The best way to support this podcast is to leave a review and share it with someone who might love it too. It really helps. See you next time.